Climate change, it is real. The science is true.
Oh my God, we're all gonna die! You know this is serious if someone on Fox News just said climate change is real.
So I was setting this up before the break, but that's the kind of the sort of coverage that's been in the air the last few weeks, because we had this climate report from the White House that looked at all the temperature changes. We had that map that showed basically, except for a tiny belt in Alabama, apparently the entire country has heated up over the last 30 years. We have the report about the glaciers in Antarctica that have passed a point now where they're sort of just going to sort of keep receding here. So Joe, it just raises the question, as I said before the break, how much time is there any time left right now to not reverse, we can't reverse all of it, but to reverse enough of it?
Well, we're going to see some consequences of global warming. We're already seeing that now. That's what the UN report said. That's what the National Climate Assessment said. So I don't think there's any question about that. The issue is, are we going to let things get catastrophic? I mean, 10-degree Fahrenheit warming, permanent dust bowls in the Southwest.
What's the timetable for that?
Well, I think we have about another, literally this decade, we have to turn around carbon pollution. I don't think there's any question about that. Everybody wants to avoid, I think, the worst case scenario. What we learned this week in the Antarctic and elsewhere is that the worst case scenario is going to come unless we act. And I will say, everybody should understand that it can always get worse. Even 10 years from now, it's still going to be better, let's say, to have only 5 degrees warming than 10 degrees warming. So there's plenty of time to act. And, the United States, I think, can be a leader still. And the Obama administration's regulations, I think, make that pretty clear, that if we were to do these coal regulations of power plants, we would be in a position to get a global treaty. And that's what it comes down to. Can the U.S. put enough on the table to be a leader for these international negotiations coming up in 2015?
And that's why Obama's doing this now. If you don't announce the initial regulation by this summer, with all the procedures you have to go through, public comment periods and whatnot, it can't be finalized in time before the end of his presidency. A political consultant would say to Obama, "You're crazy. Don't do this in the middle of the midterms. This is not a winning political issue in a lot of these states." He's not putting the politics first. He's putting the policy first. So people should understand how much he is putting on the line here and think about, what can I do to help this go over, because the political winds are not going to be in his favor.
So as usual, when it comes to a sort of a hot button political topic, the whole world turned to Pat Sajak this week, the host of Wheel of Fortune. I'm not kidding. You probably saw this, but let's put this. He tweeted just sort of randomly. His Twitter feed put this out on Monday. "I now believe global warming alarmists are unpatriotic racists, knowingly misleading for their own ends. Good night." That's what we all say before we say goodnight, I guess. And then he got a lot of flack for that. So then on Wednesday he tweeted out, this is his sort of follow-up to that. "As most of you know, original tweet was intended to parody the name-calling directed at climate skeptics. Hyperbole." Turns out, though, if you look at his Twitter feed, he has been putting things like this out for a long time. Pat Sajak, I always sort of knew he was a conservative Republican, but he's a little more vitriolic when you look at his tweet back. But Lynn, I wonder. I mean, look, I know it's a game show host weighing in on politics, and we don't have to necessarily take that too seriously. But he's sort of conveying a mindset there. As you say, it's prevalent. He's on the right. It's prevalent on the right, and that's the challenge for Tom Steyer is to break through that somehow.
And we're actually Pat Sajak is an active Republican, and he's on the circuit. You hear him speak at places. And when will people in the public eye learn that you don't have to tweet everything out, because you get in a jam like that? What he said was not an obvious parody, because it's not the business season. He's not a comedy guy. But having said that, the Steyer money is going to fund campaigns. I just see this a little differently, because the threshold is, if you're Tom Steyer, to elect Democrats. It's too late to play in the Democratic primary. I'm stressing this because that's where I see it's going. In the meantime, he has entree to the White House. He has been part of the movement to keep the climate change agenda on the front burner. So, I mean, you do a few things when you have that money and that platform. And so when people say, what does money get you in politics? It gets your issue in the spotlight. I'm not saying you get your regulations, but Tom Steyer, because he's a donor, because he could put together organizations, he has there the White House. That's what is going on.
Well, and it's also, I think the simpler thing too is it's almost this psychological game, right? Where at the end of this campaign, let's say he puts a bunch of money into New Hampshire and Jeanne Shaheen beats Scott Brown.
Right.
He wants Scott Brown to say, he wants Republicans to say, hey, if it hadn't been for climate change, I get 51 instead of 48%. So whether it's true or not, the idea is if you spend enough money, you get it into the heads of the elected officials.
So it means that maybe if you don't want him in your state, it may have the impact of softening.
Right. I don't want that to happen to me. We've seen this on the right with the Tea Party. I don't want to be the next victim of the Tea Party primary challenge. Therefore, we're going to shut the government down or whatever it happens to be. Anyway, out of time here, but I want to thank Joe Rome of climateprogress.org, Bill Scher with the Campaign for America's Future for coming in this morning.